Welcome to this special bonus episode of the Passive House podcast. I'm Zach Semke, Director of Passive House Accelerator, and we're pleased to be sharing a series of bonus episodes recorded at PhiusCon 2022 in Chicago. These interviews were made possible by generous support from Corp and Zola Windows. In this interview, Passive House Accelerator's Director of Publications, Mary James, interviews Michael Hindle of Passive to Positive. Enjoy.
Welcome, Michael Hindle from Passive to Positive. You're principal there to the Passive House Accelerator podcast here at Phius. It's great to see you. I know we first talked, probably 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And you are a very early adopter of Passive House to hot and humid climates because you are based in
Baltimore and Washington. Yeah, Baltimore, Maryland, and we do a lot of work in Washington, D.C. as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And we probably talked first about Weinberg Commons, which was a retrofit.
Yes. Yeah. Retrofit's always my favorite topic.
Yep.
So I just want to hear, it's been a while, so I want to hear, how's work going in the hot and humid climate? Has it gotten, are there new techniques or new equipment or anything that has made your role easier in the last 6 years, or is it still just like it's a complicated process creating a passive in hot and humid?
Well, it's complicated-ish. There are multiple solutions, some of which are fairly simple, like plug-in dehumidifiers. To the really wonderful answer that I'm happy to be able to give is that we started working with an engineer who dove in and said, yeah, okay, we get your concerns. Let's just sit down and noodle it all out. And this one group, Ingenium group in Baltimore and Washington, they worked with us. They came up with, they had an ERV DOAS unit. It's like a mini DOAS unit. It's inside. And it has a dehumidification function. But we had to help coach them how to do summer bypass. Now, this is a little complicated, a little bit in the weeds, but I think Passive House folks will get it, right? We insulate the building, we manage solar gain the best we can, but we're in Washington, D.C. It's hotter and heck and humid, right? Our loads are going up and up. Just, the insulation hurts that rather than helps it. Mm-hmm. We found, to our amazement, on several different projects that we were having a hard time hitting cooling load limits on the Phius standard. And we found that, doing summer bypass was a really elegant solution that some equipment can't do. So we have
can you very briefly, for anybody who doesn't understand what summer bypass
Sure.
is, just briefly explain.
Well, the idea is if it's cool outside, but there's internal heat gain, so you're getting warm in the building, right? But the air is cool enough outside. Can you bring that in directly without the heat exchange and bypass the ERV function? Now, you can have a duct that takes it around the unit, but this piece of equipment, do we use brand names on the podcast?
It's okay,
okay,
yes.
There happens to be a piece of equipment called the Alpha Air, which is an enthalpy wheel, it's a DOAS unit. It has the DX coil, the enthalpy wheel. It actually recycles the air again through the enthalpy wheel to do additional dehumidification.
Well, that's great.
And
so you can bring in the cooler air without the heat exchange, but...
Well, and then that handles the dehumidification. But they didn't have a summer bypass function.
Oh.
But we met with the engineers on the project, and they contacted the engineers in-house. And we said, this is an enthalpy wheel, which means in order to do the heat exchange, it has to turn. Just modify the controls to stop the wheel turning, and it won't do heat exchange anymore. It'll still filter. We had a solution. So just the fact, and I think everyone listening to this probably understands who works in the design field, you have a solution in mind, but anyone down the supply chain or the design, authority hierarchy, or even the developer can sort of shut it down with a word. and it becomes too difficult, and everyone gets bogged down and backed up. It takes another 2 weeks worth of back and forth emails. Well, this engineer, Ingenium Group, was willing to sit down and just talk to me. They also were willing to sit down and talk to me about plumbing circulation solutions and actually run some numbers on the calculations. Now, I know that, we work with Stengel Engineering, who are awesome. We work with other engineers as well. But it's just so nice to have those partners that, it's really not a magic piece of equipment. It's like thinking about what could this equipment do if we just think a little bit beyond what it says in the cut sheet. So that was a real breakthrough for us on some POA projects, preservation of affordable housing. We have work with them. They're all told, and we don't have a contract to do all of them, but we're working on the first 3 buildings so far. 1,100 units of affordable housing. It's a total neighborhood redevelopment. It was the first, most significant free black community right after the Civil War. Well, during the Civil War, during Reconstruction, the Freedmen's Bureau bought the land and sold it to freed slaves. They created a thriving community, and now we're doing community. I'm honored to be within the design team working on the redevelopment of the Barry Farm neighborhood. So it happened to be we sort of crossed this hurdle on the first 108 unit multifamily building. We're going into 139 units. That's currently moving into design development.
The Barry Farm
Community Redevelopment.
Right, which is where?
Which is in Washington, D.C. I'm sorry.
That's what I thought,
yes,
but I wasn't
it's
sure.
Southeast Washington, D.C.
Okay.
I apologize for that. And as I say, it's an entire chunk of Southeast, D.C. that is being redeveloped by POA, who are amazing.
Right.
Very forward-looking, always eager to hear about solutions. We have been able to offer solutions to them on design, but also on carbon mitigation and carbon modeling and that sort of thing.
And
so
you're working with them not only in DC, right? You're working in other...
So POA has wonderful relationships with other incredibly skilled consultants up in the Northeast. So we're working with POA in Washington, D.C., close to our home office in Baltimore. But we are working with Beacon Communities in Pittsburgh, and they just won an award at this conference, so that was fun. And we're working with some Boston developers as well. And we're very, very, very fortunate to be working with Jeff Spiritos and Spiritos Properties and Live, Give, Play, a development partnership doing a project in Western Massachusetts.
Which I just heard a little bit about in a talk I went to. It sounds super exciting.
Yeah. So, the other, the exciting thing that we've gotten to engage with now is we're working on our 3rd mass timber project, which, and another one coming up shortly in Washington, D.C., hopefully. And we're going to be able to explore the high grit buffering capacity of mass timber in a humid climate.
Excellent.
So that ties this carbon sequestration or carbon storage, carbon drawdown material of mass timber potentially. And I have eyes open and I'm trying to be mindful of sustainable harvesting, et cetera, and what that really means. What does carbon accounting really look like? And the scholarship is still happening, right? So I'm not taking it lightly, and I don't think anyone should. Mm-hmm. But well-managed forests can be a wonderful carbon drawdown mechanism, and these buildings we're doing are so much easier with mass timber, and they're absolutely beautiful. And, the high grit buffering capacity of mass timber, in addition to the mass, and it makes the passive thing work beautifully.
That's great. And just for people who don't know you, when you say you're working with, I just want to make sure that people understand the range of services that you provide, that your company does.
Well, it's funny because I think most people know by now, and maybe they're sick of hearing about it, but I used to be an art professor. And I was an artist and then basically freaked out about climate change and decided, I've got to get involved. First volunteered at a firm and then got hired and then decided to just go out on my own as one person and hung out my shingle in 2010. And so we've gone from doing, our first project was a living building challenge, passive house, LEED V4 positive energy building.
Why start with anything easy?
Exactly, for a NASA scientist. And that was a thrill. And we were fortunate to then work on the Weinberg Commons project. Matt Fine is here at the conference, and he was at the time working for Zavos Architects and Design. Now he works with David Peabody and Peabody Fine, the partners now. And so we were able to do that first passive house retrofit in the country of an apartment building. And that opened the door to more multifamily passive house work. And so we provide basically the full complement of passive house consulting services. We're not a rater and don't care to be one, but we do the full array of services associated with passive house woofy modeling, thermal bridge modeling. We're getting into trying to do 3D thermal bridge modeling now to deal with these complicated attachments at podiums and such. We're also doing IES, dynamic simulation modeling, for refining that net positive or net zero picture, because woofy, as many people know, is not particularly good at systems. There are no good systems inputs. There's no sort of performance curve. It's just two settings, for summer and winter. So we're getting into the dynamic simulation to sort of fine tune that. And we're doing carbon assessments, and we're doing resiliency planning now. So we're trying to embrace the whole picture of what we need to do, as we saw at this conference in the opening plenary and ever since with everyone's presentation, doing our darndest just to do what we can to reverse the damage, stop harming the world, start healing the world.
Right.
With our practice.
Right.
And I will say one thing, and this is, I guess, a little plug, but it's also the only reason I can do this work is because I have this sort of artist's heart of passion towards real fundamental transformation, right? We are hired generally as passive house consultants, but we walk away from every project having shared with ownership and the design team a full range of possibility. We try to open people's eyes to just what is possible, the depths of sustainability. We want to have in our minds a vision of deep ecology, even if we can't always achieve it. And so that's our goal. We're doing our best, and we just keep plugging. But we're still small, but we're growing. We're bringing on 2 or 3 more people. So we're just very, very fortunate and honored to be a part of this community.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to have the passion that has carried you through, because these projects that you have taken on are very complicated. But
yes.
And I shouldn't say but. And you have great technical services that you're offering people.
Yeah, and I literally didn't know what a BTU was when I took the passive house training. I just knew that there was a goal.
I had no idea of that.
No, I have no training whatsoever. No, I'd never opened an Excel spreadsheet.
That's
I'd never
amazing.
done anything. Well, you know what it is? People say that's amazing, but what I really want people to hear is that it's we don't allow people to tell us no. I mean, sometimes we all obviously have to climb down and just sort of accept what we can in a given development situation or a given project, but you don't start by backpedaling. And you don't start assuming you have to know everything to make a difference. And I never imagined I would be, people call me an expert. I took one physics course in high school. I was an artist, and an artist was all I was ever going to be. Mm-hmm. All of us can make the difference. Every single one of us. And so there's really no barrier if your heart's in it. That's really the only message I've got.
Well, that's an incredibly positive note to end on. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.